Good morning. Agenda item 5 entitled Emergent Issues. We move to agenda item 5.1, operations above flight level 600. Do we have any comment for paragraph 5.1? I see Nigeria.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, colleagues. Nigeria appreciates the intervention we made that was captured by the Secretariat. We, however, wish to seek clarification further on this issue. High airspace operations. What will be the airspace volume? Is it from flight level 600 and above? And what will be the definition of a lower airspace? Is it from below flight level 600? Thank you very much.
Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. Yes, to clarify, when we action this report within the ICAO, we will then use this part to refine and have those discussions internally and, of course, with the Commission for it to come to a conclusion that's satisfactory to all. So we cannot provide a technical answer right now because that has yet to be figured out. Thank you very much.
Senegal.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senegal proposes that we keep the definition of upper and lower airspace as described in all of the ICAO relevant documents. And so we'd like to have 600 and above. Otherwise, it might create confusion. And so the problem is if we start to change the name above flight level 600, this will affect all of the ICAO documents relating to airspace planning and the PANs as well. They'll have to be amended. And so I think that the topic right now is to look at how can we manage the airspace above the flight level 600, given that this is contained in the upper airspace. They've got the higher and lower. So I think we should keep the names and then look at specific cases in the upper airspace above flight level 600. Thank you.
Thank you, Senegal. Your comment is noted. As the Secretariat said, this matter will be reviewed as shown in the last line of the item. Any other comments on 5.1? Thank you. 5.2. Finland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to everyone. For the paragraph 5.2, we propose a little change to the wording where it reads about the high altitude and long duration. So we would propose to change the word duration to endurance as in line with the working paper presented by Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, Finland. Do I see any objection to that proposal? Okay, none. 5.3. Finland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, again, and just another wording suggestion. So on the third row where it reads about the space operations in cooperation with the existing ATM system, we propose to change the word cooperation to conjunction. Thank you.
Thank you, Finland. Do I see any objection to that change? United States?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think, without getting into semantics, I think cooperation is the more appropriate term in this realm. We're looking at two different systems, trying to get them to work together, not completely merge them. I think cooperation would be more consistent with that. Thank you.
Thank you, United States. Finland, you have any problem with this?
We are fine with the wording of cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you. So the 5.3 stays as is. 5.4. 5.5. 5.6. Finland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the last sentence, where it starts with the committee also noted the set of guiding principles, so we propose to add word possible, so I read the whole sentence. The committee also noted the set of guiding principles presented in the working paper as a possible way to move forward on this shared endeavor. This would give room for other options as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Finland. United States.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The United States would like to place a general intervention on agenda item 5 here. In general, we are concerned with the broad inclusion of the phrase environmental standards throughout this report on agenda item 5. The topic of environmental standards was not on the ANC 13 agenda and is not within the jurisdiction of this conference committee. The notion that a state can bring reference to a topic not on the agenda and that a reference is shown in the meeting report as agreed by the committee is very concerning to the United States. We disagree with the inclusion of such references in whole and would like to see the references to environmental standards removed throughout the report. At a minimum, the report should reflect what the committee noted, something related to environmental standards not agreed. We would also like the report to reflect this intervention each time the phrase environmental standards is used in the report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. You've referenced the United States comment, and for the committee, environmental standards was brought up several times. It did not refer to new standards, but to existing standards, and it is believed that the report reflects the deliberations of the committee. Does the committee have any, is there any objections or support for the United States proposal? France?
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. I confirm, Mr. Chairman, that you have read it the right way, and this is what happened indeed during the meeting. We would like the environmental standard to be respected to the utmost, irrespective of the airspace involved. Thank you.
Thank you, France. ACI?
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, everybody. ACI would like to support the comment made by the US and believes that, indeed, we do not have jurisdiction here over environmental issues. There's a particular point later on in this report which refers to supersonics and the noise issues, which are environmental issues, cannot be minimized with this, and therefore I think it would be a good thing to take out reference to environmental matters. Thank you.
Netherlands?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good morning. We would like to support the intervention made by France, and we think that the explanation of the Secretariat was very appropriate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so notwithstanding the comments of the United States and ACI, we believe that the report reflects the intention and the deliberations of the committee. Do I have any objections to the change proposed by Finland to the insertion of possible? Okay, I see none, so 5.6 would be amended as proposed by Finland, Australia.
Sorry, Chair, just on the environmental issue, I think the issue might be must comply with environmental standards. Which ones? We've just said at the start of the conference that this type of aircraft, not an aircraft, so I presume we're ruling that out. Perhaps I can suggest that, and rather than say must comply with environmental standards of unknown quantity or name, perhaps we could put something like must take into account environmental impacts. Just a suggestion, Chair.
Okay, United States.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we are keeping environmental in here, which we are still objecting to, we would say that applicable is probably the best word for it. We think impacts would be included in any assessments to determine what's applicable or not. And then I would like to reiterate the fact that throughout the report, we would like to see in references of changing noted, or changing agreed upon to noted. That is more consistent with any discussions we had. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we have a proposal for applicable from the United States as well as we're thinking about the relevant environmental standards. Please stand by. Okay, thank you. To just draw your attention to 5.45 for a moment. The phrase in 5.45 does refer to applicable environmental standards. So I would go that the committee would be in agreement with this using applicable environmental standards. We want to point out at the time that the issue was raised by Europe and there was no disagreement by the committee, hence the term agreed was used. Is there any objection to changing the phrase agreed when it refers to environmental standards to noted by the committee? France?
Should be agreed.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that we should keep the word agreed. However, I agree that the applicable standards can be used, applicable. And I think that we could have a softer phrase than must comply. In 5.11, we would put the committee agreed that higher airspace operations should not have undue impact on the existing traffic and comply with applicable environmental standards, something like that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Franz. So there's a proposal for 511 that we would delete must and insert comply with applicable environmental standards. Is there any objections? Okay, I see none. Finland?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry for coming back. Concerning the 511, we are fine with the proposed change, but we still propose to change the word undue to disproportionate, if that's okay.
Is there any objection to disproportionate? Okay, I see none. Okay, thanks. We'll go back to 5.7. Cancel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to you all. We would like to have noted in the report that the working paper 173 from CANSO was not just reviewed and discussed, as now stated, but also received considerable support. We would like to have this highlighted in the report. We suggest to add the sentence to 5.7. The committee recognized the need to further study the impact of travel through controlled airspace for higher airspace operators, as proposed. And this will also go inside with the recommendations drafted below in the report. Thank you.
Does the committee have any objections to the proposal by Council to amend 5.7? Okay, I see no objection. 5.8. Finland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are on the first sentence. We propose to delete the last part of it, so the sentence would end to the Global Air Navigation Plan and delete the end of it. Thank you.
Any objections to this proposal at 5.8? I see none. 5.9. Finland.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Just a little bit of wording change in the last sentence, where it reads about "and with industry to ensure the currency of any guidance material." We propose to change the word currency to validity. Thank you.
Any objections? Okay, none. 5.10. Okay, and 5.11 was already discussed. Any other comment? Thank you. 5.12, we move to the recommendations. 5.1/1, higher airspace operations. We are dealing with recommendation A. Finland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We propose to split the recommendation into two separate recommendations to improve the readability. So, to combine the A and B. So, the two recommendations would be combined to one, and it would read as follows. With relevant experience in higher airspace operations, share through ICAO where appropriate their experience and expertise with other states, and provide assistance to other states on the regulatory aspects of these operations. Thank you.
Thank you, Finland. Senegal.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's just to say that we agree with the comment which was just made regarding the 5.1. Recommendation 5.1.1. When we speak of higher airspace, it's general. So I think we need to speak about above flight level 600, as I said before, because this would avoid confusion because for us, upper airspace is from 900 to unlimited. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Senegal. As said, this reflected the general discussion of the committee and the agenda item. ICAO in the review will make sure that the terminology is clear. Are there any objections to the merging of A and B as proposed by Finland? Okay, I see no objections. We move to C. Thank you, no objections. So C will now be B. We move to D. Finland. Finland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We propose deleting the word preliminary because we don't see the added value here with the word. Thank you.
Any objection? I see none. E. Canada.
Yes, I would be in support of keeping the word preliminary because there was a lot of discussion about, Mr. Chairman, about the idea that it was too early to develop specific standards and provisions. So I think the word preliminary captures that idea that there's some lessons to be learned before we go to that step. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the general gist within the report reflects the notion that these guidance material, yes, they will be very initial, preliminary in nature, to perhaps be consistent with all other areas where we use the word guidance. We won't qualify in this particular recommendation is what we recommend, but it will, based on the other text in the draft report, of course, be in keeping with the scope that you have given us for this guidance. Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Chairman. So we propose that we remove the qualifier and just say providing guidance.
Okay, thank you. Is there any objection to removing preliminary and just simply leaving guidance as explained by the Secretariat? Okay, I see none. Any comment on E? Okay, I see none. E will now be D and F. I see no comment. That is now E and G. Australia.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just a suggested deletion at the end when we have situational awareness and security, and when suborbital and commercial space flights reach a level of maturity. I don't think that text is required. I think we could just go straight from and security and ensure that the framework includes their transition through airspace as necessary. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Australia. Ghana.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I propose the last line of G. We insert lower and upper airspace, because the airspace look very generic over here, as necessary. Ensure that the framework includes their transition through lower and upper airspace as necessary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, United States.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The United States would like to suggest a change in G by replacing in the areas of by, for example, so that it would read, develop a performance-based global framework for higher airspace operations considering current and future work and emerging technologies, for example, and then list those that are currently listed there under that auspice. The reason for that being is that we did not develop an exhaustive list. We do not want to limit to and from specifically based on this recommendation, and that opens it up more. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Finland?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our proposal for the G would be to actually to improve the clarity and readability to split the recommendation into two separate. So the first one would actually end to situational awareness and security, and the next one would start with the word ensure when suborbital and commercial spaceflight reach a level of maturity that the framework includes the transition to airspace. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Council.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We agree with the proposal just made by Finland, but we would like to read the last sentence, which will be the new G, through controlled airspace as necessary. That makes it more clear where we want to add it. Thank you.
Okay, there was a proposal by Australia to delete and when suborbital and commercial space flights reach a level of maturity. Is there any objection to this deletion? Okay, I see none. Proposal for in the area, deleting in the areas of to change to for example. Any objection? Senegal, the proposal to change to through controlled airspace as necessary. Would you still require lower and upper airspace? Yes, Senegal, saying Council has proposed that the last sentence would read, ensure that the framework includes their transition through controlled airspace as necessary. If this change is accepted, would you still require for it to be lower and upper airspace?
Thank you, Chairman. I think the transition from lower to upper airspace is more appropriate. So when we talk about transition, it's from takeoff until attaining level 600. So I think the first proposal is more appropriate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we are hearing all the changes. These changes would have impact on other areas. So we would like to take the comments on board and have the Secretariat review and make the applicable changes as necessary, if there are no objections from the committee. Thank you, and we may come back to it once we review 5.5 and see what impact it has. Okay, with that, we will move to agenda item 5.2, operations below 1,000 feet. Nigeria, you have a comment before?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, colleagues. I commend the speed of progress we've made so far this morning. However, I'd like to crave your indulgence to kindly take us back to recommendation 5.1/1, which reads higher airspace. We note the clarification made by the chair and the secretariat on this issue, but we'd like, for the purpose of clarity, to suggest that this should read flight level,
Operations above flight level 600.
operation above flight level 600 for the purpose of consistency, because under paragraph 5.1, we have noted that the term higher airspace operation is not clearly defined. So to avoid confusion and for the purpose of clarity, and since this terminology is going to be reviewed, I have not clearly agreed on what it means. For the purpose of consistency, our suggestion is to keep, to go back to operations above flight level 600. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Nigeria, thank you for that intervention. So we're proposing the agenda item is 5.1, operations above flight level 600. And so we're proposing that the recommendation should have the same heading for consistency. Is there any objection from the committee? Okay, thank you. I see none. Thank you, Nigeria. Yes, thank you. So we move on to agenda item 5.2, operations below 1,000 feet. 5.13. 5.14, Germany.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just two small changes for wording which appear to be more appropriate. In the second line, to change from unmanned aircraft systems to unmanned aerial systems. And in the last line, to change from into airports to into aerodromes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Germany. Secretary.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. ICAO has already defined that these aircraft are aircraft, not aerial systems. So this would be a change to the definition that would be very inconsistent with all the existing standards on this. So the Secretariat would not support that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we're saying it would not be consistent to change aircraft to aerial now. Is there any objection to changing airports into aerodromes? Okay, I see none, so that change will be made. 5.15. 5.16. 5.17. 5.18, 5.19, 5.20, Germany.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a proposal to replace the last sentence saying also some support was expressed for developing future work
through the GAN process, it was agreed the ongoing work should continue, to replace the sentence by the following one. And I read it in a quick verse and then in dictation speed. Broad support was expressed for developing future work through the GAN process, and it was agreed that ongoing work should continue with redefined terms of reference of future activities. We think this is more concrete and better reflecting the debate of the committee, and I read it out in dictation speed once more. Broad support was expressed for developing future work through the GAN process, and it was agreed that ongoing work should continue with redefined terms of references of future activities.
Is there any objection from the committee to this amendment? Okay, I see none. 5.21. Germany?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, again, and we had some debate on this issue during the committee meeting. We started that we were talking under the agenda item operations below 1,000 feet. I think the US made a statement it could be a little bit below 1,000, a little bit above. And then I do remember your summary where you verbally said typically below 1,000 feet. Now the last part of this paragraph is going far more into the other direction, which currently says including investigating the desirability of a maximum altitude. And on this one, I ask for a slight change so that the last part would read, using parameters to be developed in a transparent manner, including investigating the, and then to be deleted, desirability of a, continue maximum altitude, and then to be added, at which these operations would be allowed. So the final half sentence would read, including investigating the maximum altitude at which these operations would be allowed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Germany. Is there any objection to the change? Okay, I'm seeing none. 5.22. Okay, 5.23, we're moving to the recommendations. Okay, so 5.2/1, entitled Very Low Altitude Operations. We are dealing with recommendation A. B, Australia.
The expression approved UTM systems, I'm not aware that there is an approval mechanism, so perhaps we could just say ensure that UTM systems are interoperable. Thanks, Chair.
Is there any objection from the committee? Germany?
Was about to make the same proposal.
Okay, thank you. So I'm seeing no objection to the change. C, Germany.
Mr. Chairman, the work that has to be done here really is with ICAO, and that's why we find the mainly the content again in the recommendations directed towards ICAO.
and I think it is letter, is it F? We find it later under G. So we think we should not maintain this this recommendation directed towards the states C, so to delete it and to just maintain this recommendation that is directed towards ICAO further down.
Okay, the proposal by Germany is to delete recommendation C, as this is duplicated under G. Is there any objections from the committee? Okay, I see none. Okay, D, UAE.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With regards to item D, while we agree with the merit of the recommendation, of course, but we really think it's not really clear what ICAO needs to do. While on the state's part, item A is, I think, similar to item D, but item A is well clear that states will, of course, collect and share information related to several items, including UTM, tactical risk assessment modules. So I think instead of keeping item D looks this way, we suggest that it mirrors item A as well. So we propose to say, after the word "and guidance," we add including unmanned aircraft systems traffic management, UTM, autonomous operations, and tactical risk assessment modules, and then we continue the paragraph by saying to support. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Is there any objection from the committee to this amendment? Okay, I am seeing no objection. And Germany, you wanted to comment on D as well?
Well, in fact, we would have had a small change to the original text to substitute development by deployment in the second line, and then again, as before, in the last line, aerodromes instead of airports, to which I haven't heard any negative feedback from the Secretariat. Thank you.
Okay, Germany, the change for aerodrome is accepted. Since this is directed to ICAO, ICAO doesn't really deploy, so development is a better term. E, Australia.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just the last part of E, ICAO getting involved in providing advice about public-private partnerships. Think it's a bit outside the ICAO remit, so could we just suggest guidance for the identification, instruction, implementation of the whole financial mechanisms just being removed? Thank you, Chair.
Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The idea here was to take into account the necessary development of guidance on financing mechanisms, which in the context of UTM are identified as necessary. There is already ongoing work, including policies and guidance regarding financing and funding of aviation infrastructure. So the idea was to take into account the specific characteristics of this work on UTM and perhaps develop some guidance in that area. PPP was listed as a way to associate public and private entities, not necessarily as a limitative example. And of course, the development of work on these activities, guidance and policies on financing and funding of aviation infrastructure would have to be done through the Air Transport Bureau. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Secretariat. Germany, commenters on the same area?
Yes, actually two comments. The first one on this one, and then I have to come back to letter D. So on this one, I think as it is phrased now, it reads interest stakeholder in the development of the UTM system. I think until now we do not have the UTM system. For this reason, we would rather like to have it phrased in the development of UTM systems, and then including developing guidance and not by developing guidance. So, development of UTM systems, including developing guidance. This was my first point, and then I have to come back to the recommendation before.
Okay, thank you. Is there any objection to the change as proposed by Germany? And is there any support for the change proposed by Australia? New Zealand?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. New Zealand supports the proposal by Australia. We don't actually recall a clear discussion around public-private partnerships or funding mechanisms. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I see support from the committee for the change proposed by New Zealand and Australia, or do you believe that it reflects the discussion? Netherlands? Okay, I'm not seeing any support for the change proposed by Australia and New Zealand. And coming back to Germany and D.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Secretary is certainly correct that ICAO is not doing deployment, and but when you read carefully, it's not said in the sentence. It's rather that we say contribute to the development of operational solutions and guidance to support the safe and coordinated deployment. So that's really the issue that we are behind, and that's why we thought it's not about the development, but it's going to support the safe and coordinated deployment. So please have a second thought on that one.
So you're referring to the second development, not the first one?
Yes, the second one in the second line, yes. Sorry, perhaps that was the misunderstanding.
Yes. So the proposal by Germany is to change where we have safe and coordinated development to safe and coordinated deployment. Is there any objection? Thank you, Germany. The Secretariat is proposing that maybe implementation is better than deployment. Okay, so we're seeing that, so we're going to change safe and coordinated development to safe and coordinated implementation of aviation activities. Thank you, Germany. Denmark?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We were just going to raise the point that Germany just raised there, so we cede the floor.
Thank you. So we move to F. Germany? So there's no comment on F. G? Germany.
Yes, I was too quick. On G, just a wording question, the last half sentence to read, including investigating their vertical limit. And not, well, sorry, no, this was the one I referred to before. So to be in line with the arguments I've brought forward before, this point should read, including investigating their vertical limit rather than the desirability of a vertical limit. So I've brought forward the arguments before, and this would simply be in consequence with the change we made in the paragraphs above. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Germany. That was noted for that change to be made. H. Germany.
I'm sorry for busy entertainer here. On H, I asked to delete, to concentrate on the work to be done rather than to talk on any groups, and for this reason to delete in the first line through an appropriate group of experts. So simply to concentrate on develop standards and recommended practices, for which I think all rules are quite clear. Guidance or best practices related to UTM, and then please to add including autonomous operations after states and regions have had sufficient time to test and validate, delete UTM, and finish with concepts. So delete through an appropriate group of experts in the first line, add including as the last word in the second line, and delete UTM in the last line.
Okay, is there any objection to this proposal? Okay, I see none. I. United States.
Sorry to go back one more, Mr. Chairman. Could we have subpart H reread again as amended?
In Germany?
Yes, I read the final version. Develop standards and recommended practices, brackets SARPs, guidance or best practices related to UTM, including autonomous operations, after states and regions have had sufficient time to test and validate concepts.
Thank you. Germany? Okay, we move to I if there's no further comment. J. France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chairman. Just for purposes of clarification, we would like to change the sentence slightly, and I'll read it in English.
Et la proposition est la suivante.
Proposal is as follows.
Support and coordinate the implementation of core airspace management services, including, but not limited to, geofencing and georeferencing, as well as ensuring the consistency of ATM/UTM interfaces. Period. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Franz. Is there any objection to this change? Okay, we move to K. L. And the final recommendation, M. Okay, thank you. And so we move to sub-item 5.3, remotely piloted aircraft systems. 5.24, Saudi Arabia.
Alaikum. Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Saudi Arabia would like to change the first sentence in line 6, which is need for the operational data to be need for the collection of technical and operational data. Thank you.
Is there any objection to this change? Okay, I see none. 5.25. 5.26. 5.27. 5.28. 5.29. Recommendation at 5.30. Recommendation 5.3/1. Recommendation A. Recommendation B. Poland.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chairman. Then on the point B, after word including, we suggest to add the required, so it will be including the required for detect and avoid DAA.
Enforced, because I think it's good.
Yeah, Poland, can you just clarify exactly where you want the change? Can you say, read the sentence as it would sound?
Of course, at point B, after the last line, including, we suggest to add, including the required for detect and avoid .
Secretary?
Thank you. I'd just like to get a clarification. Are you inserting the word required for detect and avoid being required or data being required to support detect and avoid? Thank you.
Poland?
Yes, including that required. This was my mistake. And including that required. It was a mistake.
Thank you, Poland. So it would read, including that required for detect and avoid. Is there any objection from the committee? Okay, I see none. C, Poland.
Yes, we're suggesting to delete it requested states to, leaving just support.
Okay, thank you. D, Poland.
Yes, there is some misspelling in letter point D, second line, integration of RP. It's better to change to integration of RP-AS.
Secretary.
Yes.
Thank you. There are times when we talk about the aircraft itself within the airspace, as opposed to the entire system and how the system as a whole is operating. And in this particular instance, we're referring specifically to the aircraft, not to the entire system. So that's why there's no S on RPA. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we clarify that was not a typo, this was intentional. France?
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand the Secretariat's intervention. Nevertheless, I think that we need to keep the S so that the entire system is consistent, whether it's ground stations, the C2 link, or the aircraft itself. It needs to be a coherent and systemic integration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, France, Poland. The Secretariat is happy to accept that change. Canada?
Chair, since you've already accepted that, I don't need to speak further. Thanks.
E? F? Poland?
Yes, in the point F, after air-pass-related SARPs and guidance, we suggest to add such as detected and avoid.
Any objections? G? Canada?
Thank you, Chair. I would suggest that if we were going to mention detect and avoid, that to be consistent with B, we would also mention the C2 link.
Yes.
Thank you,
Noted,
Chair.
yeah. G? H? Council?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We just approved in the report in 5.27 the need for a specific code was broadly recognized by the committee. It was agreed that ICAO should review the potential ramification of the establishment of code 7400 or alternative codes, including the military stakeholders, as the dedicated SSR code for lost CT-link events prior to progressing this matter. So we think it should not say that we continue discussions, but ICAO should look for appropriate code to be used. So we would like to propose to start the sentence with, in coordination with states and military stakeholders, propose the best option for the establishment, and then continue as read. Thank you.
Is there any objection from the committee to that change? I'm seeing no objection. Aye. No proposals? Thank you. So we are moving on to 5.4, cyber resilience. Okay, thanks. So we move to 5.4, cyber resilience. Para 5.31. 5.32. France, is this in 5.31?
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Non, c'est 5.32.
No, Mr. Chairman, it's 5.32.
Okay, 5.32.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the first line, we would like, as was discussed, to specify that the panel will work under the auspices of the group of experts will be under the auspices of the Air Navigation Commission. After that, Mr. Chairman, in the last line, I would like to take up the term you used in your summary. When you summarized the session, you referred to the committee recognized that cybersecurity should be included as a subject in the Global Air Navigation Plan, etc. These were the terms you used precisely. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Secretary?
Thanks, Chairman, and good morning, everyone. Just to note that this committee makes recommendations to ICAO, and that'll be to the Council of ICAO. It is the responsibility of the ICAO Council to then designate which bodies do which bit of work. So we do not, as a committee, identify particular parts of ICAO to do bits of work. So we do not accept the recommendation for the Air Navigation Commission to be specifically delineated in this particular instance. That's the responsibility of the Council of ICAO. Thanks, Mr. President.
Thank you. Secretariat commented on the second part.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, I would like to recall that, in the summary, we really specify the trust framework, not cybersecurity, because cybersecurity has another connotation that involves even subjects that are under another bureau in the ICAO structure that involves the people from the security part of it. And in our summary at the end, on purpose, that's why we included the trust framework. That is what we are developing right now, and not cybersecurity as a whole. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Secretary of ACI.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning again. ACI believes that our working paper 187 was kindly supported by the committee, And so we would propose to add a very small amount of additional text at the end of paragraph 532. The committee, that would read, the committee also recognised the recommendation of Working Paper 187 that the trust framework should be practical, efficient, flexible and effective for all parties. If you like, I would read that out again.
Please do.
Thank you. The committee also recognised the recommendation of WP 187 that the trust framework should be practical, efficient, flexible and effective for all parties. Thank you.
Thank you. Any objections from the committee to that addition? Okay, I see none. Netherlands?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come back to the point about the Air Navigation Commission, and having heard the response of the Secretariat indeed on how the responsibilities within ICAO are divided, but would it then be an option whether the Secretariat could find wording that at least the conference expressed its preference or something like that, or that it is noted that a proposal was made by the conference to do it like this, something like that, at least to bring the message to the Council, not to say that it is already agreed. Thank you.
Thanks, Chairman. Just to note that the Air Navigation Commission is the primary technical advisory body to the Council. I have no doubt in my mind that they'll refer it directly to them, but this committee just makes recommendations to the Council of ICAO. Thanks, Mr. President.
Good, thanks. France?
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will leave it up to the wisdom of the Secretariat and ICAO to look at the issue of the Air Navigation Commission. I understand the difference between the word cybersecurity and the expression trust framework, and I can accept that. However, I would like to have a clear response about the fact of as a subject on the Global Air Navigation Plan. Thank you.
Yeah, Secretary.
Thanks again, Chairman. Just to be clear, the topic here has been about the Global Air Navigation Plan. There is a parallel plan, the Global Aviation Security Plan, and I'm sure that global plan has a cyber thread being developed in that through the Aviation Security Panel. But the elements that we're looking for here, as the Secretariat was trying to explain, was just that trust framework that is trying to reduce the threat surface, but the elements of the cyber security that are the threat would go within the Global Aviation Security Plan rather than the Global Air Navigation Plan. And so we didn't want to be trying to take their work off them, if that makes sense to you. But what I can do is to make sure that the aviation security personnel here are very clear that that has been a request from this committee.
Thank you, Secretariat. France?
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I am a member of both groups, and so I know the difference very well. But I would like, when this is inserted into the GAMP, I would like to be put as a subject and not as a thread. Thank you.
Acknowledge. Germany?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was about to make the same emphasis on the inclusion of as a subject. So I understood very well the difference between the idea how you're going to treat the trust framework in the GAMP, But when the French colleagues mentioned the cyber security instead, on purpose it was included to say as a subject, so not in any way to interfere, replace or anything the GAZEP and the other part of the work. Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification, Germany. Second.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is to strongly support France's proposal. Already at the regional office level, we see this phenomenon. Definitely, this aspect must be taken into consideration in the GAMP so that the ANSPs can take it into consideration. It's more and more important, and this is very important for us now for this to be in the GAMP and for this to be highlighted. Thank you.
Thank you. Move to 5.33. France.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to come back to an intervention which I made during this meeting, and it was supported by a number of states. I would like to add, after global aviation system, 2 sentences. The first.
Equally allow various states to accord for their essential aeronautical infrastructures with their national or regional obligations. Cela fait référence.
This makes reference to the fact that we already have laws, and in some regions, I think many, and so some work needs to be done on the essential aviation infrastructure. The second sentence is,
Aviation framework should not be detrimental to fair competition between aviation stakeholders. Period. Et ensuite,
and then the paragraph will continue with the committee recognized, etc. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is there any objection from the committee? I see none. Thank you, France. 5.35. Belize.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to make a correction here in the acronym COSESNA. The capital S should be a capital C for the Central American Corporation for Air Navigation Services. And also, I'd like to bring or highlight the fact that the footnote COSESNA does not appear to ensure that all member states are reflected. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Belize. 5.36. France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to add 2 or 3 things to the approach. Now it is coordinated in the report, and I think, as it was recalled by several delegations, it's important to include the idea of transparent and balanced, and I will read this.
The importance of a transparent, coordinated and balanced approach to cyber resilience in civil aviation, etc. Thank you.
Thank you, France. Any objections? I see none. 5.38. Okay, so we move to the recommendation on 5.39. Recommendation 5.4/1. Recommendation A. France.
Merci, Monsieur le
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question about terminology. To replace service providers and industry with stakeholders. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there any objection? Okay, I see none. So as we move on, just note that there's a, if I'm correct, there's a problem with the numbering.
I don't have it on mine.
Okay, so I'm not sure what you might have, but some of us have an incorrect numbering on the system. So, so the next one, which might read A in your papers, which should be B, is there. Yeah. So recognize that cyber resilience of the aviation system depends on continued cooperation among all relevant stakeholders. Oman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to all. For clarity and to have consistency between item B of this recommendation and line 3 of paragraph 5.32, where it states, the committee agreed that coordination with both aviation stakeholders and non-aviation technical experts, particularly the Internet governing bodies, is necessary, and then it continues. Therefore, we suggest to amend the item B of this recommendation to read as follows, if it's accepted by the committee. Recognize that the cyber resilience of the aviation system depends on continued coordination amongst all relevant aviation stakeholders and non-aviation technical experts. Full stop. Thank you.
Any objections? Okay, I see none. So it would now be recommendation C, reads, recognize the need to be prepared and respond to cyber events. Oman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We suggest a slight amendment to this item C to replace the word events with the threats, if that's appropriate, to read as follows. Recognize the need to be prepared to respond to cyber threats. It might be more specific.
Oman, we are saying that we can have events that may not be threats but still have to be responded to, so that events would be broadly cover everything. If we want to be specific, more specific, we can say cyber events and threats, if there's no objection to that from the committee. France?
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I push the button to support your proposal. I do prefer the word events. I think that all the work on threats is of a bit of a different nature. Thank you.
Okay, do I see any objection from the committee to leaving the recommendation as is? Okay, no objection. So we leave it as cyber events. And D, in coordination with industry and international organizations, work with ICAO to increase awareness of cyber threats and system resilience processes and coordinate cyber-related incident information sharing and training activities. No objection. Council?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We think there should be a point E for the actions of states regarding the need to share information, as was stated in Working Paper 62 and Working Paper 90. Both papers express the need for sharing a cyber-related threat information through appropriate channels, and the committee encouraged states and international organizations to facilitate information sharing through appropriate design channels. It's now only as a recommendation for ICAO, so we would propose to have an extra point stating, recognize the need to share information related to cyber events with other states and international organizations through appropriate designs channels. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Franz?
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that indeed this is something extremely important, and I support Council's proposal. Thank you.
Secretary?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. It's just for clarification, because we have this already almost covered in J when we say encourage states and international organizations to facilitate information sharing through appropriate designated channels at the global and regional levels. So this would be a repetition of the same thing. So, but I'll leave to the committee to decide.
Council?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To explain my proposal again, what I was trying to say is that it is now a recommendation for ICAO to encourage states, but it was recognized during the committee meeting that states should share it themselves as well, and therefore we would like to make it a recommendation to the states as well as proposed during the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Council. Is there any objection to insertion of a new E as proposed by Council and supported by France? Okay, I see no objection. Okay, so we'll move to what would be now F. Establish a formal project involving states and international organizations for the urgent and transparent development of a globally harmonized aviation trust framework through a group of experts. France?
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to slightly change this draft as follows.
Establish a formal project involving states, international organizations and stakeholders for the urgent and transparent development of a globally harmonized aviation trust framework through a group of experts, or period. And then add a small sentence, priority should be given to the definition of governance principles, semi-period. Thank you, Mr. President.
Secretariat, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I guess the first part of the proposal, we have no problem with that. The second one, because we are now entering in the definition of the prioritization of the work that should be done, as the Secretary is of the view that this prioritization of the work should be left to the discretion of the group of experts without telling them in advance what is priority or what's not priority right now. We would prefer to leave the group of experts to decide on priority, but we also recognize governance as one of the most important aspects to be developed by this group. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
France?
Merci.
Thank you, Chairman. I think this is a key issue of the trust framework. And when I spoke yesterday at the session, my intent was to put that matter front and center. I do understand that the group of experts has to establish its strategy, but we are here to provide guidance. So I would like for the word governance and definition of governance principles appear prominently in the recommendation. And that is why I'm proposing that it be inserted here. If there is another wording possible, I wouldn't be opposed, but I think it's important for that word to come out in our deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Franz. Is there any objection from the committee? No. Australia?
Chair, just in relation to the France addition, can we put and relevant stakeholders? I think stakeholders is a bit too broad a term, and we've used the word relevant stakeholders in recommendation B. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any objection to the proposal of Australia? Okay, no. So we now move to G. Coordinate with both aviation and non-aviation technical experts in the development of the trust framework, and in particular with the governing bodies of the Internet. No proposals. H. Incorporate the trust framework into the Global Air Navigation Plan in an appropriate manner to highlight its urgent need, its importance, and to improve its visibility. I. Develop and promote high-level policies and management frameworks for cyber resilience to help mitigate cyber threats and risks to civil aviation based on international industry standards and preferably aligned or integrated with existing management systems. France?
Thank you, Chairman. Secretariat won't be happy about this, but I would like to say develop as a matter of priority and promote high level, etc. This really is an important insertion to me. Thank you.
Any objections from the committee? Okay, none. J. Recognize the need for the aviation community to be prepared for and be able to respond to cyber events. K. Encourage states and international organizations to facilitate information sharing through appropriately designed channels at the global and regional levels. L. Promote multidisciplinary state and industry collaboration on cyber information sharing between the aviation and non-aviation stakeholders. France?
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chairman. Like earlier, I'd like to say stakeholders instead of industry. Thank you.
Okay, any objection to that from France? Australia, do you need relevant stakeholders? So we put relevant stakeholders. And M, promote tabletop exercises and maintain a repository of lessons learned and scenarios available to member states. France?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for your patience. I would like to add, before little m, which I support, a recommendation which would be as follows.
Promote a systemic and integrated risk management approach, taking into account risks inherent to cyber threats, as well as the ones relating to safety and security of air transport and to the needs of aviation systems operations. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, Franz, can you just read that again, please?
Promote a systemic and integrated risk management approach, taking into account risks inherent to cyber threats, as well as the ones relating to safety and security of air transport and to the needs of aviation systems operations. Thank you. It was mentioned in the body of the report as a cross-cutting disciplines, etc. Where I'm insisting is on the risk management approach integrated. Thank you.
Secretary?
Thanks, Chairman, and good morning all again. I think Our problem here is we agree with the sentiments completely, but to put an onus for cyber security promotion or education on us would be a bit difficult. I think if the committee's happy, we would take those sentiments on board and make sure that that information is passed to our cyber security people so that they've got that message as a corollary of this committee's deliberations. But for the recommendation, I think if we could just leave the security aspect out of the obligations from this committee to ICAO, because those cybersecurity aspects weren't a big part of the discussion. I acknowledge, first of all, that France did make those interventions on the floor, but again, we didn't have the cybersecurity experts to have that full discussion. So I'd rather leave it out of the recommendation and take it on board as a sentiments from the Secretariat across to our security people. If the committee's happy with that, Mr. Chair, I think we could move forward.
France?
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to recall that the first word of the sentence is promote. And it's extremely important for me that we don't try to sideline cybersecurity responsibilities. We need to take an integrated approach, including safety, air navigation, and security. So I'm not going to insist on having a recommendation on this, but I would like to emphasize the working method and the need for all states and ICAO to be capable of overcoming, getting out of the silos and take an integrated approach to risk. I think it is fundamental in how we deal with this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Franz. Spain?
Gracias.
Thank you, Chairman. We think it's very important to support the French proposal to include this recommendation, which advocates an integrated approach on this. Thank you.
United Kingdom?
Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The United Kingdom also supports the French proposal.
In the hands of the committee.
Senegal?
Thank you, Chairman. Senegal supports the proposal by France to take account of integrated approach to this risk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm seeing support for the including new M as proposed by France, and then we'll now have N as well as a recommendation. So with that, we close the draft report on 5.4, and we'll take coffee and return to complete on 5.5.